What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Drums and Drams whiskey review. My name is Cameron, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the second Booker's release of 2022. This is the Lumberyard Batch. Now, before we get into it here, I just wanted to take a second to let you guys know that yes, I'm going to nose, taste, review, and give this thing a score, as I normally do on these review videos. But at the end of the video, during the sort of final thoughts portion, or I guess during the wrap up, I'm gonna have some overall thoughts on Booker's to talk about, and I'm also going to have some suggestions or recommendations moving forward. So gonna be centered on Booker's there, but also centered on maybe another bottle or two that I've been thinking about, you know, when I'm looking at Booker's and when I'm looking at the current market these days. I don't want to get ahead of myself here. We have some work to do before we get to that part of the video. Real quick, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying it. Drop me a comment below if you've had the opportunity to try this batch and what you think of it. But for now, let's go head on over to the bottle breakdown. First and foremost, the age of this whiskey is 7 years, 1 month, and 7 days old, coming in at 124.8 proof or 62.4% ABV. The mash bill of Booker's is thought to be 77% corn, 13% rye, and 10% malted barley. Obviously, this comes from the Jim Beam distillery. SRP for this product is around $90, and while there isn't much of a secondary market for current Booker's releases, this may come in anywhere between $100 and $130. So obviously, this is a little bit of an older batch of Booker's, especially if you compare it to some of the recently released batches, which are generally around like 6.5 years old or so. A lot of complaints about this brand, including from me over the last couple of years, but just seeing those stats improving on paper is a really positive thing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and check this thing out. Lumberyard Batch on the nose. Yeah, so right away, this thing is a little harsh, a little bitter on the nose, definitely coming off with some youthfulness. Yeah, let's just keep digging into it. Getting a lot of cinnamon on the nose, some lemon oil as well, kind of that signature peanut brittle or sharp peanut note that we've been getting on the last couple of years of Booker's releases. There is a little bit of a sweetness to balance out those harsh or even bitter notes that I'm kind of getting on the nose. I talk about this a lot when you're dealing with overly young whiskeys, which is kind of a white cake note, almost a little vanilla in there as well, but definitely kind of a white cake, sugary sweetness. And yeah, that is kind of a nice thing that I'm getting here. But at the same time, it feels like it's not quite enough to offset some of those harsher notes in here. Yeah, some acetone. And there's also kind of a flash of like a red fruit or a red berry, and I like that. I typically look for some fruity notes in Booker's, especially on the batches that I prefer, but so far on the nose, this is really edging towards that alcoholic, acetone, lemon oil, peanut brittle side of things, which doesn't sound great, let's be honest. And it's a little bit less towards those red fruits and sweet notes, even though they do appear just a little bit. Yeah, green apple peel, again, a little bit bitter. And finally, there is, of course, I mean, we're talking bourbon, there's a caramel note in here, but it's like a candied caramel note, not really a dense, rich, or syrupy kind of caramel. So with that said, it's not looking promising on the nose, but let's go ahead and check it out on the palate. Cheers. Oof. Oof, not great. Yeah, that is, well, slightly redeeming in the mid palate, I guess. Very intense up front, as we would all come to know and expect from any Booker's release, especially current day Booker's releases. But immediately you're hit with those bitter notes, that green apple peel, kind of just a bitter oak, a bitter barrel char kind of quality. It's not dark, it's harsh, it's bright, it's astringent. Not very pleasant. I will say that the palate to me is maybe a little bit better than the nose in terms of kind of bringing in some of those sweeter notes to counteract a little bit of the harshness, the youth, the bitterness, but it just feels like too little too late in this case. All right, let's do another sip. Yeah, second sip is definitely better on this. I think your palate does have to kind of get itself in the realm of what you're sipping on that first sip. it feels like once you're used to the astringency and used to the bitterness, yeah, okay, then we can get into some of the sweeter notes and some of those other qualities. But I'm gonna continue to say it about this batch and about so many of the recent releases from Booker's. It's just too little too late. Now, with Booker's, we all know that it's got that nice Kentucky hug, and the finish here is no different than any of these recent releases. It definitely hangs on in the chest. It's warming. It's really nice in that regard. But just on the palate, it's just got that kind of nasty, sweet, to use the word residue in a video is not great, but it's got that nasty, sweet residue on the palate. And that's combining with all of those bitter notes and that acetone. I can't get away from the fact that this almost tastes and smells like fingernail polish remover. So not digging this batch of Booker's, and I don't think I need to take another sip of this. I'm not a fan, and I haven't been a fan of many recent releases from Booker's. We gotta talk about the elephant in the room at this point, which is the price. This thing has gone over the last, 5, 6, 7 years from a $60 bottle with decent availability to a $90 or $90+ bottle that is getting harder and harder to find. And for what reason? I mean, the quality of this thing is crashing. It's in a nosedive. It's not good. And I thought I was gonna break up from Booker's, but recently I was down in Kentucky. I found this on the shelf. It was $90, but it was SRP, and I thought, you know what? Let's just try this thing. And I kind of regret that decision. So let's go on and kind of talk about these few bullet points here before I kind of give you my recommendations or kind of suggestions moving forward. Who is gonna like this batch? I think if you're a fan of the last 2-3 years of Booker's releases, then you might like this batch. If you're a ride or die Booker's fan, you might like this batch. If you want something that you don't really care about, like too much of the detail and the tasting notes, you just want something intense, you might like this batch. But anybody else, I don't think is gonna be a fan of this 2022-02 Lumberyard Batch from Booker's. There's not a lot of redeeming quality in here. Maybe over ice, it could save itself, but at this point, not a fan here. Value-wise, SRP, I'm gonna say this is a bad value. Even though we are getting over the 7-year mark in terms of age statement, it's not enough to save this thing, especially when you actually experience it on the nose and palate. And then looking at secondary value, 100 to 130, that's an even worse value. So please don't pay secondary prices for this batch of Booker's. Before I give this thing a rating, I just wanna give you guys a quick recommendation. So the first one is that I think if you're a fan of Booker's and you're getting a little disenfranchised like I am, a little unenthused, I don't know what word you wanna use, I would recommend checking out Larceny Barrel Proof. And coming from me, that's kind of weird because Larceny Barrel Proof is another limited release brand that I'm just not a big fan of. Over the last year or so, basically starting with B521 up until now, Larceny Barrel Proof is kind of finding its footing, and it's got a lot of the same qualities as Booker's, even as a wheated bourbon, even coming from Heaven Hill, a different distillery. The cinnamon, kind of the baking spice notes, some of the peanut qualities, the proof point, I mean, it's all right around what Booker's is. It's coming in $30 to $40 cheaper. The availability might not be great, but honestly, I think people should start turning their attention towards Larceny Barrel Proof kind of overall. Now, specifically, I think for a bottle recommendation of Booker's, I have this cleverly disguised back here. I wanted to kind of call this bottle out, which is the 2021-03 batch. It's the Bardstown batch from Booker's. This is not a bottle that I've reviewed on the channel. I really hadn't tasted it. I picked it up, but every batch of Booker's just wasn't doing that great for me. And so I didn't give this thing a second look. But recently I kind of went through all of my Booker's bottles and I found out that this batch is actually pretty darn good. This is kind of hearkening back to the Booker's of yesteryear, right? 2015, 2017, 2019, some of the years of Booker's that I really enjoyed. This third release of 2021, the Bardstown batch, is great. So I'm not gonna give it a full review right now at the end of this video. I'm just gonna call out a few notes, let you know why I like it. Then I'm gonna rate both of these batches that I've tasted today, and then I'll get you out of here. Try not to make this video too terribly long. Right away, dark fruits on this, and those fruit notes are what I love to see in a batch of Booker's. Lots of vanilla here, even some chocolate on this Booker's, which is really nice. Not a lot of those sharp, astringent notes. Yeah, there's some peanut in here, but the acetone is gone. It's not too alcoholic and not too young. And this thing is like 6 or 7 months younger than the Lumberyard Batch, which is kind of crazy. So let's check it out on the palate quickly. Oh yeah, totally different ball game here on the palate. It's dark cherry, a little bit of kind of dark purple fruits even, maybe dry dark purple fruits. Great cinnamon, great baking spice notes, and that chocolate note is fantastic in here. As we move into the finish, it's not getting astringent at all. In fact, I would say that there's like a nice cherry syrup note that's developing, and then some leather and some oak on the back end. If I had to recommend a Booker's batch over the last 2 or 3 years, it is gonna be this Bardstown batch. It's got this red label, and I don't know if they pair their labels with their tasting notes of the specific batches, but this tastes like red. It tastes like red fruits, and it's just a fantastic batch of Booker's, and something that I can recommend like 1000% over the Lumberyard Batch. So if you do see this bottle at SRP and you want to learn to love Booker's again, I think this is really where you start, and this is what Jim Beam should be looking at in terms of developing and blending their next batches of Booker's. Very quickly, I have the note cards here, and the biggest difference in these 2 batches of Booker's, besides it actually being younger for the Bardstown Batch, is the location in the warehouse. This comes from much higher floors than the Lumberyard Batch, or is it over here, the Lumberyard Batch? It doesn't matter. It comes from higher floors, and because of that, I think you're getting some more barrel influence, a little bit more of a syrupy fruit quality, and it is intense, which you would expect from a high floor aged product, but it's not giving all that youth that the Lumberyard Batch has. That's gonna do it for this video. Let me rate both of these bottles very quickly. The Lumberyard Batch, I'm gonna give this a 72 out of 100, which is a C-. And for the Bardstown Batch, I'm gonna go 84 out of 100. I think it's a pretty solid batch of Booker's. It deserves a solid B. And while I didn't think this was gonna turn into a review of 2 bottles, here we are, I don't know how many minutes later. Yeah, so there you have it. That is what I'm thinking about these 2 batches of Booker's. Get the Bardstown Batch. Please pass on the Lumberyard Batch. It's not very good. So if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, drop me a comment below and let me know if you've tried the Lumberyard Batch, if you've tried the Bardstown Batch, what you think of Booker's overall, especially over the last couple of years. But that's gonna do it. I'm gonna end with a final sip of the wonderful Bardstown Batch. Thank you guys for checking this video out. Cheers, and I'll see you next time here on Drums and Drams.